Before I kind of start exactly and look at the core of my research, I should say that, I work from a kind of transdisciplinary area or intersection between post-humanities, so the kind of, rethinking of humanities for a kind of modern human world, where not only the human is in the center, but rather human and, humans' relations to modern human world. Environmental humanities, of course, continental philosophy, which is also, I'm actually a philosopher by training, visual culture, queer deaf studies, and eco and bioart research. And hopefully some of those things will become a little bit clearer. And maybe I should also say, before I dive a little bit more, is that eco art or and bioart are those areas of contemporary art that actually really engage and investigate questions related to ecology, the environment, but also biological matter, perhaps organisms, perhaps fragments of biological matter like tissues or cells or bacteria, as a kind of medium in art. So it actually, in that sense, bioart is this sort of outcome of cultural fascination with the development of natural and biological sciences. So, but more specifically, actually, in my work, I look at how contemporary art practices deal with questions of death in the context of environmental crisis and sex mass extinction. Culturally speaking, kind of traditionally, when we hear death, we particularly think about human death. That's the death that is, valued and that is grieved, that is mourned, and so on and so forth. So, I kind of look at how various examples of contemporary artworks, but also cultural expressions, narratives, stories, discourses, explore death, dying, grief, and mourning beyond the kind of human exceptionalism. And in kind of contemporary theory, when we speak human exceptionalism, is actually a term to describe the ways culture and traditions actually put the human as something or a kind of actor that is sort of exceptionally valued, more important than other elements of the living or non-living world. So and it is very pertinent to Western theory, but also cultural imaginaries, right? So I kind of ask, how can we imagine and understand relations between life and death, living and non-living, and human and non-human in a kind of more ecological manner, and in the face of planetary environmental disruption? Does this kind of mass death that comes with the sixth great extinction, but also with the violence that we perpetrate, the kind of environmental violence, affect our kind of conceptual, perhaps ethical understanding of death? And also, I kind of ask, how are these matters positioned in the context precisely of, environmental violence, of modern human vulnerabilities and resilience? And I think that these questions are also the questions that come in the present time very much in the context of the discussions on the pandemic and COVID-19 and how it is, entangled with actually kind of also destruction of natural environments and creation of spaces where viruses can jump between humans and non-humans or different species. But also, in a kind of more philosophical terms, I think that, I also ask, how can we approach these issues, the issues also of difference, of interdependence, of livability, unlivability, because we do create, spaces that are more livable or not livable for both humans and non-humans. If we think about the human beyond the kind of, the global north and the kind of Western privilege, and how we kind of can approach those issues in a kind of more attentive and ethical way. So it kind of boils down hugely to questions of also environmental ethics. And I think that, in particular in this project, Queer Ecologies of Extinction, that form part of the SeedBox phase 2, I look at, cultural expressions and various initiatives, cultural initiatives, but, eco and bioart, and also kind of popular scientific and scientific discourses and narratives in the context of the Baltic Sea region. And I try to look at how, how they frame scientifically, but also culturally, the questions of death, extinction, again, livability, non-livability, human, non-human relations, and multi-species futures, but also deep pasts of the Baltic Sea. And, to kind of remind everyone, of course, the Baltic Sea is the sea that is, pronounced the largest dead zone in the world. And what it means is that it is a space, characterized by hypoxia, which means that there is not enough oxygen for the organisms living there. And obviously this is kind of, caused by, among other things. I mean, there are kind of, more geographical factors, but hugely it is caused by, the pollution that is pumped into the Baltic Sea. So, by exploring how different meanings around death, extinction, and even environmental grief and environmental violence are shaped through cultural expressions and narratives, I also kind of look at, what kind of cultural and social imaginaries are being formed. And as you notice right now, I really re-emphasize this point because, these are the kind of, I mean, sometimes not really conscious landscapes, cultural landscapes of, thought, that are directly really linked to the kind of values we ascribe to the world, to different elements of the world, but also the values we ascribe to that which is passing away, which suffers, which disappears, be it other organisms or ecosystems or landscapes. And what it means also, if we talk about values, this also means that we talk about ethics. So what kind of ethical relations, with modern human communities of the Baltic Sea region do engage in and form, what kind of possibilities of future we contribute to or not. So I think that these are the kind of, core issues that come in my work. And of course I could speak more, but maybe that's the gist. This type of research is really about so-called wicked problems, right? So problems that are not easy to solve, that are perhaps not fully solvable, but that are, kind of in their complexity also require very kind of, multidisciplinary or inter or transdisciplinary approaches. I mean, these problems are, of course, the kind of, anthropogenic change, environmental disruption, violence, and extinction, right? But also, what is important here and what is interesting are, the kind of cultural and ethical meanings of death in a modern human sense that are sort of, that form part of it. They are not always necessarily, straightforwardly acknowledged. But I mean, that also means that, we do not only need, we need, sustainability and environmental science, but we also really need to think through, the kind of cultural narrative around that, the kind of meanings and values we ascribe. And I think that this research really touches those problems. And also, in my work, I kind of combine post-humanities and environmental humanities, but also philosophy and the kind of interdisciplinary gender studies. And here I think that I would like to re-emphasize that, of course, gender studies is not only about gender equality, but rather, or questions around queerness, but it is very much also a kind of whole analytical apparatus that can be applicable and is applicable in the case of investigation of other matters like human and non-human relations. Because, the ways we culturally understand nature is very often kind of also affected by the kind of construction of the world, how we see, how the kind of, sometimes narratives on nature are very gendered too. But also, what is, I think, very, very interesting about this particular, my different types of work, because I also should add that, I'm a leader of the Eco and BioArt research group at Ecologies, which brings art and artistic research as a kind of very legitimate partner of discussion. So my work also, involves and looks at art as a kind of really powerful tool, a kind of way of understanding the world, and as I said, a legitimate partner in discussion. So I think that these are the kind of interesting sides, and perhaps different than the usual way of thinking about research related to the environment. Well, I think that there are different aspects to be brought up here. I think on more kind of local and more local and global levels, whatever we call it. So first of all, I would say that it kind of gives a better understanding, or at least aims to give a better understanding of our relation to the more than human world we live in. Value that we ascribe to non-human death, to extinction of other species, to also questions of necropolitics, so the kind of mechanisms that generate death, as a kind of outcome of capitalist extractivism in a sense. But also, what kind of values we ascribe to the disappearance and change of certain landscapes, and what also follows ethics. But also, I think it really draws attention to what kind of, environmental imagination and futures are being formed. And what it also kind of means, I think, is it gives, sustainability research a new dimension, as this kind of, it adds to the philosophical dimension, which also means understanding of the world we live in. So, it's not only about very hands-on solutions, but also, what kind of values are driving those solutions. And, by handling different complexities, I think that it also questions certain issues of, of sustainability. Yes, I think that's that's the probably the core things. But also, I think maybe last thing to add, and I tried to probably note this a little bit earlier. It really brings as well, art and artistic research as a kind of valid and important partner in discussion, because art is also the way of shaping our understanding of the world and various imaginaries and imagination of what can be done in the future, to create perhaps a better future. I love the transdisciplinary character of my work, and I should also add that I'm the co-director of the Post-Humanities Hub, a kind of research group, kind of network of networks and research platform that is based at Ecologies, that really engages with more than human humanities. I love working with actors beyond academia, and I have been, throughout the past years and now very vividly also engaged in the work with cultural and especially art organizations. I am a member of the BioArt Society based in Helsinki. And, we've been working on many different projects. One of them was Breaking Friction project last summer. Currently, we are all immersed in the state-of-the-art project, which is a kind of, Nordic Baltic project gathering many organizations and actors working with questions of art in the Anthropocene. So I think that's hugely, a fascinating part, because it also gives, a much sort of, direct engagement with the general society. I love working with the questions related to the environment and modern human. I've always been very passionate about these issues, as like as a teenager activist, and later on, as a researcher, really kind of thriving at the intersection of the questions of environment, biosciences, and the humanities. But also, I think that realizing passion about research in a fantastic, team of like-minded, passionate people, and that applies to both, the Post-Humanities Hub, TMA Yenus, and TMA as a department, broadly speaking, and of course to the fantastic SeedBox team, because that's also a team of, like-minded people in a sense. I'm currently working on revisions of, one article and starting writing another one. So that's the kind of, the usual thing that you can probably hear from a researcher. I already mentioned state-of-the-art network. So as I kind of said, it is a kind of network of organizations working with questions of art in the Anthropocene. And right now in autumn, actually the Swedish team led by myself and really kind of the Post-Humanities Hub and other actors are organizing the so-called midterm event of the project. So we'll be actually in an exciting way dealing with questions of the Baltic Sea, of livability in the Baltic Sea, of the relation of human and non-human along the coast. So that's very related to also my SeedBox project. But also I think the exciting news is really that Cecilia Osberry and myself are now starting our work as the editors of this book series on modern humanities at Routledge. So I think that's the the great news from this week. And yes, I think that more things to come, but I mean these are the immediate ones that I can mention.